Today I wanted to share with you the history of a ship that went from being the pride of a nation to sitting completely abandoned for nearly 50 years. This is the history of that ship, the SS United States. Before we start talking about the SS United States, let's first go over what led up to her construction. In 1940, the United States Lines launched one of the most popular ocean liners to ever sail, the SS America. The America was considered to be a perfect liner in terms of size and speed. However, only a year or so after her launch, the United States would get pulled into World War II. The America was requisitioned as a troop ship in order to transfer U.S. troops to Europe. It was here that the ship would sail along with the Cunard Queens, Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. In addition to these ships being huge, the Cunard Queens were fast. The Queen Mary had a maximum speed of 32 knots, while the America had a top speed of just 22 knots. This led the United States Lines and the United States itself to start planning for more. The ship that they were planning would be both larger and faster than the America, and she would be called the United States. The SS United States was ordered in 1949, laid down in 1950, and launched on June 23, 1951. She was 53,330 gross registered tons, 990 feet long, with a top speed of a still unbeaten 43 knots. She had 12 decks and could hold a maximum of 1,928 passengers, along with 900 crew. She was designed to be the fastest ocean liner, not just for her commercial travel, but so she could be converted into a troop ship in less than 48 hours in the event of World War III. In addition to that, after the Normandy caught fire and sank in New York Harbor, it was declared that the SS United States would be almost completely fireproof. The SS United States' interiors were also something special. They were similar to the Americas, as the same people designed both ships. The United States had 3 dining rooms, one for each class, a first-class ballroom, a pool, and several lounges. In the early 1990s, the ship's interiors would be completely gutted by a company named Marine Inc. to remove all former asbestos in the ship. This actually would help the ship long term, as her gutted interiors are to this day in better shape than the Queen Mary's. On July 3, 1952, the SS United States set out on her maiden voyage. She shattered the Queen Mary speed record, which at that point had stood for 14 years. The voyage lasted 3 days, 10 hours, and 40 minutes. The 1950s and 1960s were the ship's glory years, and this is when she would routinely sail full. The United States also carried many celebrities during this time, including, but not limited to, Marlon Brando, Sean Connery, Walt Disney, Walter Cronkite, Bill Clinton, Marilyn Monroe, John Wayne, Judy Garland, and John F. Kennedy. All of these celebrities sailed on board the ship. Everything was going well for the United States. However, this would soon change, as air travel began to take off. Ocean liners fell out of favor with the general public, and in 1969, the SS United States was withdrawn from service. In the early 1970s, the ship was purchased for $12 million, where she would then pass through several owners up until 1977, when the ship came close to being refurbished into a casino that would be located in Atlantic City, New Jersey. This concept fell through, however, and plans changed to try and make the ship into floating condos. If you're familiar with ocean liner or cruising history, you'll know that in the late 1970s is when the cruising boom took place. Companies like Carnival Cruise Line were buying old ocean liners and turning them into cruise ships, and with a ship as famous and as well known as the SS United States, it seemed her days of sitting abandoned wouldn't last for much longer. Norwegian Cruise Line looked at purchasing the vessel, however they would instead go with the SS France, renaming her Norway. Through the 80s and early 90s, the ship continued to sit abandoned, but this would soon change. In 1994, Marine Inc. purchased the vessel with the intent of turning her into a cruise ship. She was towed to Ukraine, where all of her asbestos was removed. Things were looking good for the ship. However, Marine Inc. ran out of money, and the ship was towed to the city of Philadelphia, and that's where she's been ever since. In 1999, the ship was placed onto the National Register of Historic Places, but that was the only real bright spot for the 1990s. Good news would come for the vessel in 2003, as Norwegian Cruise Line, the company that had originally planned to purchase the ship back in 1978, bought the SS United States. The plan was to renovate the ship similar to how they did the Norway in the mid-90s, adding extra decks and such. The United States would become the flagship for the Norwegian America division of the company. For the next few years, plans were drawn up, and it looked like the United States would once again take to the seas. But this would never happen for two main reasons. Number one is that Norwegian America failed spectacularly, and number two is the recession happened, and suddenly it seemed like a bad investment to purchase a ship that hadn't sailed since the 60s. In 2009, it was reported that Norwegian Cruise Line was looking to scrap the SS United States. This wouldn't happen, as a company known as the SS United States Conservancy bought the vessel. This meant that the vessel was saved from the scrapyards for the time being. They would continue to keep the ship docked in Philadelphia, looking for ways to repurpose what they called America's flagship. And in 2016, it seemed they'd done it. Crystal Cruises looked at purchasing the vessel, remodeling her, adding new decks and balcony cabins. Looking at what they came up with, I have to say, it isn't terrible looking. Don't get me wrong, it definitely isn't good looking compared to what we have now, but I don't really mind the look of what Crystal Cruises came up with, and if it means saving the ship, I'm all for it. But this is from 2016, and of course this never happened. Crystal Cruises deemed it too much of a financial risk and backed out. So at this point, two major cruise lines have backed out of saving the SS United States, and the vessel has been sitting completely abandoned in Philadelphia since the 1990s. It looks as though for now the ship has survived the pandemic, but one has to wonder what the future might hold for America's flagship. If you want my opinion on what I think will happen to the ship, I would put 85% odds the ship is sold to a scrapyard in the next decade. People have been trying to find a purpose for this vessel since the 1970s, nearly 50 years ago, and well, nothing's happened. I'd rather see America's flagship go off in dignity than watch her rust for another 30 years. I'll put 10% odds that the ship will continue to do what she does now, sit in Philadelphia and rust away. And as for that final 5%, that's the ship's chances of getting repurposed, maybe not as a functioning cruise ship, but a museum of sorts. Hear me out on this. We move the ship to New York, renovate her into a National Museum of Maritime History, or something like that. I really think that could work for the ship, and I know that if this did end up happening, I would pay a visit. However, I'm not going to hold my breath. The SS United States didn't even sail for 20 years, yet she has sat abandoned for nearly 50. What are your thoughts on the future of the SS United States? Leave them in the comments below. Anyways, with all of that out of the way, thank you all so much for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.